Last week I preached to you from the final verses of Matthew's chapter 7, which is the closing, which are the closing lines to Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. The final verses of that chapter 7, the close of that Sermon on the Mount, read like this. Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. The reading then continues with Matthew's chapter 8 and the first healings in the Gospel of Matthew. When Jesus had come down from the mountain, great crowds followed him, and there was a leper who came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you choose, you can make me clean. He stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I do choose, be made clean. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Then Jesus said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go and show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. When he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, appealing to him and saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed in terrible distress. And he said to him, I will come and cure him. And the centurion answered, Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only speak the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man with authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and the slave does it. When Jesus heard him, he was amazed and said to those who followed him, truly, I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And to the centurion Jesus said, go, let it be done for you according to your faith. And the servant was healed in that hour. When Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her. She got up and began to serve him. That evening, they brought to him many who were possessed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word and cured all who were sick. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took our griefs and bore our diseases. Thus ends the reading of the word.
Thanks be to God.
The Greek word that's translated into English as the word authority is exousia. Exousia. And it has several meanings, such as, well, having leave or permission to do as one pleases, as well as meaning that one has the power of rule, the power to decide judicial matters, the power of one whose will and commands must be submitted to by others and obeyed. That is the meaning of the word authority. If you have served in the military, you know about submitting to those who have authority. Yes? Well, I don't see any nodding.
Amen.
That said, this teacher, whose authority and power are so evident before the crowd, does something even more astounding. he touches the unclean. It's no wonder the crowds are astonished, because persons who have authority and power don't touch the unclean. They don't have to. They can get others to do that sort of thing for them. We too should be astonished as we stand with the crowd, because this Jesus doesn't perform as expected. One of the first things that is pointed out by the commentators is the position in the Jewish religious community of these very first miracle recipients. All three are excluded from any participation in the religious community. They are marginalized by the community, each one for a different reason. The leper is excluded because he's not only contagious, but in the tradition he is considered ritually unclean. His diseased condition is deemed a punishment from God for some past sin. The centurion is excluded because he's a Gentile, a religious pagan, and a servant of the Roman emperor. Peter's mother-in-law is marginalized because she's a woman. Not only that, she's a widow woman, who next to orphans are the most ignored of the social ladder. That argument may sound a little thin, but Jesus was an advocate for widows and orphans, and is one of the reasons why Paul's inclusion of women in the leadership of the early church is so remarkable. It was quite simply unprecedented. I don't think people in Jesus' day lived with blinders on any more than the 21st century folks live with blinders on. What I mean to say is sometimes we don't see the injustice that is right in front of our noses. The leper was an outcast because some religious authority decided that leprosy was a disease imposed by God on those who had sinned against God. And no one questioned that authoritative rule. Although persons with Hansen's disease live separately from the rest of the world, no one nowadays believes that God imposed that disease on them. It would be like the 20th century folks believing that AIDS was a disease imposed upon by God because those people sinned against God. Oh, wait. 20th century people did believe that. I guess it was difficult to hang on to that kind of thinking when one witnessed the devastation of AIDS as an epidemic in Africa. In Jesus' day, Gentiles were excluded, well, because they were Gentiles. They were from the wrong side of the gene pool. And besides, they didn't worship the same God. The inclusion of the centurion's story in this triplet of healings doesn't really herald the inclusion to come of Gentiles, because Paul was already well entrenched in bringing the good news to the Gentiles. Matthew's Jesus remarks how amazed he is by the faith of the centurion. He says, "Truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith." Wow. Certainly there is room for him in the kingdom of God being brought about by Jesus, who is the Son and the servant of God. These healing stories may testify to the power within Jesus, but even more importantly, they testify to the God whom Jesus serves. The gospel good news being presented by these stories is that no one who truly desires to embrace the kingdom of God will be excluded from it. the church is challenged today by the same issues of exclusion. We all suffer in one degree or another from racism, sexism, ageism, and I had to make up a couple of words, disabilityism, sexual identityism. We need to be aware of who isn't among us. When we are aware, we can see who we've excluded. We can see who we've marginalized. We can see who we are not ministering to. Look around. Look around. Just look around. Who are we excluding from our company? Who have we marginalized? Who is missing from this picture? Who's absent from your pew? We minister to the homeless with pancakes and desert diner. But are they here in worship with us? Where are the children? Where are the teens? Where are the young adults? We have a challenge before us, my friends. And that is the challenge to take off the blinders that keep us from seeing what is wrong with this picture. Matthew's Jesus showed us today who was marginalized in his day and offered them healing. I believe that the church can be a place of healing for all people. We need to let the healings